is a huge part of the writing business, of the writing life. Some people are just naturally have very few negative emotions. I hate them. But for the rest of us, I think it makes you a better writer to have to deal with that. It makes you human, makes you understand more people. So I would say, ask yourself, what is your character's deepest problem, like in the scene? And is this scene making that deepest problem worse? Are you showing new faces to it? Are you pushing them harder into facing their biggest fear, their biggest problem? The way they have to change but don't want to, is this heading in the direction where they have to face and overcome that? And if you're not, you're wasting space. Just period. The scene shouldn't be there in the first place. So those are a couple of they're not really tricks. I mean, those are a couple things that might be going on for you. If you make the problems worse, and just start asking your characters questions, or like why is this hard? What's going on? I know what's going on here. What are you doing? What do you want to do? So best of luck. It's hard. Some people say it's not hard, and usually they're just they're full of something. And sometimes they're just full of happy thoughts, and that's just the kind of person they are. There are people who never get stuck. It does happen. But generally, I think that little critical mind is there to help you become a better writer and a better human being. So I listen to it. Yes, sir.
To kind of piggyback off of that, I wrote this down. What's the main thing that you think about when developing or beginning the hero's journey for your characters?
Yes, stay hydrated. What's the main thing I think about when beginning the hero's journey for my characters? Well, I don't generally think of it as we're beginning the hero's journey with these characters. I think of, what's a character type I haven't done before? What's interesting to me? What are some problems that bother me in the world today? What's a problem that's realistic for this character to have? Where do they need to grow? What's an external conflict that hopefully is interesting in the world? Who's the right antagonist to bring that out for them? And how can their internal and external conflicts line up in interesting ways? So there'll be a character in this book that I did a lot of work on antagonists in the work before this book, and as I work through this book, and I think you'll see that he brings out things in Kyler that wouldn't have otherwise come out. So what are the things I think about first? Man, it's just so many things. I don't have a template. It's a soup. It's oh, Kyler, he's got plenty of problems. Okay, what's the most interesting one for me to tell now? What's a logical order for me to tell this in? What are some other characters that would have to deal with something that would maybe shed light on that that would have thematic resonance with that I could tell these stories, and these characters having all their stories told at the same time would make sense and layer meaning together. So it's like I ask tons of questions, most of them go nowhere and are super frustrating, and I wouldn't tell you to do that, except it's like, that's just how I do it. It's a huge mess, and I muddle forward, and then I watch videos, and I read books by people who are smarter than I am, and I go, oh, this would have been more efficient if I'd done this right away. But I, after doing this for a long time, I realized it's always a mess, and every book is hard in its own way. And if you're pushing for it and trying to write new books every time, rather than trying to do the same thing over and over, it will be that way, because you'll try harder things. Like when I started this book, I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna write the perfect action fantasy. It's gonna be short, it's gonna be 124,000 words, because I had a bet with John Scalzi. And I was gonna win that $5, dang it. And I was like, I can do this. It's right on my alley. It'll be quick. It'll be full of action. I'll write it in the first person point of view so that I keep it brief. and then you know what? I like to do things that are hard. And if this thing isn't hard for me anymore, if I can do that action sequence really well, it's like I am actually gonna make it more difficult for myself. So I add things, and that's who I am as a human being, unfortunately, and it affects who I am as a writer. There was yes. Yeah, my volunteer.
First, a compliment. The very first book signing that we went to was yours for the very first White Writer book, and it's neat because I'm a huge reader. Not so much this one. Like, you read the Night Angel trilogy, and then I read it, and it was the first trilogy we ever got to talk about as much. So that was really
That's awesome.
exciting.
this is the only trilogy I've ever completed.
All right. All right. Yeah. Short attention spans for the win. Yes.
As a writing question, I find that the hardest part, well, not the hardest, but the one that I like to think about as the hardest part is the final line. How do you come up with how do you know when the final line is there, and how do you just go, that's it, I'm done, the story's over, or this part of the story?
So when I cheer after I write the final line, that's a good sign for me. I've only done that once, but I was right. But I was right. That was with the end of Shadow's Edge, actually. That was like I was in my little apartment and I went like, yes, that's so good. Oh, that's gonna make me money someday. I'm not published yet. That's gonna make me money. I was really proud of myself. So I've also learned, like I talked about emotion management, it's like you need to pat yourself on the back because nobody else will until you don't need it anymore. like there's this thing, Samuel Johnson wrote, he wrote, or was it Bosworth's Life of Johnson? So Bosworth wrote this huge thing about Samuel Johnson, and this huge biography, and it recognized his genius now. And he wrote this very scathing letter to a guy who offered to support him, when he was done. And he's like, where were you? I don't need you now. And I needed you, back then when I was drowning. It's like you wouldn't hand me a stick, and now I'm on the shore. You're like, here's a life preserver. Like, so you need to actually, it sounds ridiculous, but you need to actually tell yourself when you did a great job. It's like there's nobody who will tell you you did a bad job. There's nobody who will tell you you did a great job. You'll generally know when you did a bad job. Sometimes you'll be wrong, but on the days you did a great job, you got to be like, yes, I kicked butt today. That was good. I did a good day's work. So I didn't answer your question actually. Well, I answered it for 1 out of 9 books. 1/9 of the time, this is what happens. It's a great question. So how do you know when the last line is done? I mean, either you're just exhausted and you can't do it anymore. You're so sick that you can't pick that up. But you shouldn't have the final line be something you're really exhausted and angry about. So this is a problem when you actually try to think, when people ask you questions, sometimes it takes a while. I'm usually aiming for it for a while is the problem. So I know what's gonna happen. Usually the last section of a book for me is quicker because I know exactly where I'm going and I've got some ideas about how exactly it's gonna end. So the last page usually might take me a lot more than the last line. The last line I usually know pretty well where I'm gonna nail it. So, but you want to leave readers with the right feeling of satisfaction, and also hopefully if you want to make a career of it, be like, I want the next one now. Yeah, so there's some art in making there be enough hooks that there's closure, but there's also that's not helpful. That's not a helpful answer to that question. That's all I got. So I'm sorry. I brought my best, and it kind of sucked. So see, I told you. I gave you. Okay. Next question. Yes.
As somebody who recommends books for a living, should I, and by that I mean, would you feel comfortable recommending this to somebody who hasn't read the 90?
Yeah. Okay. Would I recommend this to somebody who has not read the 90 trilogy? Yes, I would actually. I wrote this book with a lot of challenges in mind, but one of the challenges was that there would be people out there who reread Night Angel or read it for the first time and were immediately diving in. And those people would be bored if I told them what happened before, right? Because they just read it and the last thing you want, hey, Kyler, do you remember what happened yesterday? Let me tell you about it for 5 pages. And you're like, as you know, Bob, the other day I was struggling. That war we had just a month ago. Well, yeah, let me tell you about it. So I knew I would have those readers who had everything dialed up in their mind. And then there would be readers who are like, well, yeah, I read it, but I got a busy life. I read it 15 years ago, and I haven't looked at it since then. Where's Wikipedia? And then there would be readers who I hoped would give it a try new, because I was like, you know what, in some ways, I feel like I've grown as a writer. I feel like this is my best work. I want you to jump in here. I want you to see me on my best. Like, this is good stuff. And so that was a challenge I took on. I said, I want to tell people that this isn't Night Angel Trilogy Book 4. One, because Tracy would give me a hard time. But so would everyone else, to be fair, it's Trilogy Book 4 again. Yeah, I consider that one. But I wanted to structure things so that readers could come into it, and that I would help remind you enough that as you go along, it would be artful enough you wouldn't be bored if you're like, yeah, I just read that. Oh, this is what he thinks about that now. It's a little different. Oh, this is his takeaway. That's a little different. I remember what he's talking about, but I didn't know what his take on it is now. So that I'm actually bringing, while I'm giving old exposition of stuff that's already happened and reminding everybody, I'm actually casting new light on it. It makes sense in a new way, or it matters to the character now in a new way. So I worked a lot on that exposition to make that be as fluid as possible for all three camps. And it was super hard. And it was like, made rereading, and I made sure I had some beta readers who had never read Night Angel. And does this make sense to you? And then I was like, okay, I'm trimming out some of this stuff because that's a little bit boring or it's a little too much, or you actually don't need to know that right now. And then making sure that I introduce information as it becomes relevant to this book and to these characters and to what they're doing now, and letting the rest just fill in. So I think after they finish, they'll be like, wait, I need to go back and read Night Angel. But I think all of this will actually make sense to them without it. So that was something I deliberately took on, and I was like, this is going to be super hard. I'm going to do it anyway. So that's, other questions? Yes, sir.
What has, since, it's been a very unique last, 4 years, what has COVID taught you as a writer, and how would you say that's reflected in your new book?
A story about this. When COVID started in March, right? So it's March-ish. We started with some lockdowns and stuff. So March, I came out of my office, I think it was in December. It was February, sorry. February, so March, February. And I said to my wife, I think I kind of miss people. So COVID taught me I'm slow. And if I have a space to work and my family, I'm pretty darn happy for a long time. I like my people, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing this thing. What, there's something going on in the world? Oh, sounds bad. Okay, back to Mikiru. So one, I kind of do live a little bit of a hermit-like existence for sort of long periods of time. I'm weird that way in that it works for me for a while. It actually does not work for me forever. I actually am a social human being. So that's one thing it taught me is wow, I'm a strange person. What was the question? Just what it taught? What did COVID teach me?
And
As a writer, oh man. So for a long time, I thought this book is like, this book has not been affected by COVID at all. Was kind of my line. Not affected. Yeah, look, it barely affected me. Look, I didn't even notice COVID. And it's like, it's not true. That's not true. I didn't want to write a COVID book. So I didn't want to have a book that, this is my reaction to COVID. I looked at, like Shakespeare, he lived through plagues that ravaged London and shut down the theaters also, again, that everything shut down because people were dying like flies. And yet you look at his work and it's not like, oh, this is the plague one. He took those senses of loss and things that everybody was feeling, and he transmuted them, like through art, so that they could apply to a lot more than just one thing. And so I think there is grief and loss in the book that's not like just like, oh, there's obvious plague going on. I think it filled in places of my own understanding about the human psyche, about how people act, in ways that I think enrich my art in this book and will continue to. But I couldn't. There's not like one-to-one lines. I don't think, and in some ways the artist is the worst person to interpret their work. But I don't think it's a one-to-one. So, a great question though.
Okay, yeah. I have a question. So I know that I read the books when they first came out 15 years ago, and I remember that there was a lot of world building that was kind of like not built. You know, like you left a lot of, like you said, space on the edges of the map. And I know that you talked about that in this book about how you got to fill some of the space in on the maps. And so I'm wondering about your world building. When you were writing those first ones, like, was the space on the maps empty to you? And were you comfortable? Were you like, I'm just gonna go for it, even though I don't know everything about this world? And then, or was it more like you had stuff and now it's changed?
So it was both, oddly enough. I had studied how George R. R. Martin does exposition, and one of the ways that he does exposition is really brilliant. And George does quite a few things really well, technically. I mean, his technique is good. Like he's a skilled writer who's worked a long time as a writer. And it's like like I just sort of talked about, he introduces exposition where it's important to the characters, where it's going to change things for them. And that's like exposition is one of the main things about epic fantasy. I'm teaching you so much stuff. Like, how do I do that without stopping and we lecture you forever? Stopping and lecture you. Like, you notice it when it's info dumping. When the character is like, I need to get to the market, which way is it? Like, well, you gotta go left, and you gotta go past the fishmonger, and watch out for the two people who are beating each other up, because they always do that. That's the kind of marriage they have. And then go past it, and then like I could probably build five details about the world that you're gonna see as you run, because oh no, when you get to the fishmonger, actually it's different than what you thought, and the fish are much bigger and they're scarier and they have sharp teeth and they're alive. And like I can build that because it will be a problem as the person runs. So I thought, one, I'm dealing with young children, small children in a lot of stuff. Their world is very constricted. So one, I wanted to have that constricted. They don't know very much. That's fantastic. I can start the plot and get us moving really, really quickly and introduce things as we go along. Also, so I did that as a strategic choice. I'm going to introduce things as they become plot relevant to the characters. Also, I was a younger artist and I was like, I don't know what I don't know, and I'm making stuff up, and I'm doing things, and this is great, and like, oh my gosh, I get to book 3, and I need to make all these things fit together. Oh crap. It was really easy to make up all this stuff when it was just like, I'll just make up a new character for that. I'll just make up a new character for that, and it's like, I need to show why these characters are all here. And if I had a whole subplot, like it needs to matter in book 3, or it's just like, well, why did you make up that dude? So part of that, I blundered into some things that were like, okay. And then as a more mature artist, I come back to that and I'm like, I built some things that I don't love anymore, or that I borrowed a thing that seemed to make sense because it was like off the edges of the world. And I'm like, okay, there's this group of women and magic is like this. And I'm like, oh darn it, that's a little more like Robert Jordan than I'd like. Okay, how can I take that now? I've already established it. Like I've got to deal with it now. Okay, let's start making some changes. Let's take a turn with that. Let's make this more mine, rather than like this is a lot bit like Robert Jordan. So some of those things were completely accidental, and then I can still work with it. It's, you sort of do the happy accidents as you go along. If you're Bob Ross, and that's me. Bob Ross in Epic Fantasy. That's what they call me. Okay, we're running out of time.